Welcome. It's difficult to believe, for me, that we've made it this far. And I think Dr. Wright would say the same thing. And he'd be proud of all of us for working hard just in our lives, but also for those of you who've helped with this already and may help with it in the future. I thank you. It would be easy for me to talk if you were a bunch of orthopedic surgeons. Unfortunately, you're not. You're my classmates, and many of you have succeeded beyond, maybe your wildest dreams, but certainly that was the point of coming to this college, to do your best. So what we know about this, especially what I know about this, is relatively limited. But we do have experts here today. Cheryl Bascom, Vice President for the college, class of '82, will speak with us and share our panel. And I want to say a few words about Ines Kayal. Are you here? Yes. Thank you. Some programs like this, in my experience, and this course comes from my work in orthopedics, but nonetheless, you have to have the right person. And so it was a program to find that right person that actually took a while, and we were helped by Bob Holly as well as our classmates in the mortality working group, and specifically Mike Thomas and Bill Geiger. And then we were super fortunate when Ines showed up, because in fact, she's exactly the person we needed. She's not someone who's focused on one thing, and I just have to read you. You can find these things on the web on your own. And oh, by the way, congratulations on your promotion to associate professor. Great big deal. So. But she has a PhD in bioengineering from UC Berkeley. That's a pretty cool campus too, but nonetheless, we're here at Dartmouth. And a degree from Berkeley's Haas School of Business, UCSF, and undergraduate work at BU, where she received her BS in bioengineering. But as she says herself on the website, I am an interdisciplinary engineer, scientist, researcher. My research intersects biomedical and systems engineering, computer and data science, healthcare services to enable the structural transformation of healthcare to improve services and clinical treatment for people with chronic conditions. I don't mean this to be charged, but you might argue that one chronic condition is your skin color. It can also be your gender or sex. So there are a lot of things that because of we enter life with preconceived notions, some of them reinforced, that may not be healthy for us. So I feel we're super fortunate to have Ines, because she's not going to approach this with, if you want an opinion, but with the science and the skill set necessary to do this work. This is not meant as a jokiness, so don't please take offense, but she writes complex research, appropriately enough, in a journal recently, Complexity, which had an issue focused on complexity measures and models in supply chain networks. Of course, everyone knows what supply chain is because we all went through COVID. But the article titled in that particular journal was Architecting a System Model for Personalized Healthcare Delivery and Managed Individual Health Outcomes. It is complicated to manage health. I work at a giant healthcare company, some of you may know, and one of the things we look at is how do you manage health? Because people tend to segregate it into one person or a bunch of people, but not really seeing that one person as a whole, as part of a system, as part of a complex event. And that's what this work has focused on, and I hope you really do enjoy this program today. It's been a big privilege for me to be involved with all of you in a more direct way for the last 5 years, so thank you. And I guess now is when we key up the second film, yes? Thank you. By the way, these films, just before you do start it, Dr. Wright was instrumental, as some of you have already heard, in our success. And Rocky's relationship with Dr. Wright is very personal, and he could probably speak about that in great detail. But Dr. Wright said, oh, you've got to meet this person, Dr. Walton. And I've already talked about Dr. Kayal, but I walked into her office shortly after our reunion 5 years ago, knowing that I was going to do this job. Jerry had already discovered these numbers and given me the task of figuring out, okay, go meet somebody. walked into Dr. Walton's office. And, you know, I'm an old guy, and here she is, this budding young great researcher at the college. And she goes, "What? No, you're not going to do any work." But fortunately, after Mike and Bill came back and started to demonstrate that we were serious about it, she actually became one of our biggest supporters. And were it not for her, the first film wouldn't have occurred, nor would the second. She identified the people that could help us, identified the resources, guided their work, and you're going to now see film 2 as a result of those collaborations.
When I was 18 years old, there were doors opened for me and for a number of other Black students, specifically Black men. When those doors were open, 78 of us took the challenge to come to Dartmouth College. When 2019 rolled around, we were preparing for the 45th reunion. We had discovered as a class, in looking for people to attend the reunion, that a significant number of Black classmates had already passed at that time. And of the 78 of us who had matriculated in September 1970, 24 had already passed. It was way too many too soon for all of us. And I think the class as a whole recognized that. And so there were eventually 9 of us that threw ourselves into the mortality working group.
We weren't trying to fit in necessarily to an existing project or program, but rather really focus on how can we further explore, how can we investigate the issue of racial health equity that has affected our class so dramatically, and other classes as well. Over 4 years, our working group has explored opportunities and investigated options for a student-centered, and I mean undergraduate student-centered program, and found our home, found our fit with the Health Equity and Advocacy Lab, which is doing groundbreaking research in the area of health equity, and it affords us the opportunity to establish our program, the Class of 1974 Health Equity Scholars Program.
In essence, the HEAL Lab is just kind of a collection of researchers who have an interest in identifying what kind of structural oppressions keep people from accessing good healthcare. The Class of 74 project is a seamless integration into what HEAL is currently doing. And the whole notion of building a group of scholars who will move health equity research forward, that's priceless.
The student is connected into a program where they're working with faculty on research. Those faculty are working with providers at DH, providers beyond DH. They're also working in policy, at the governmental level, and so the effect and what they're able to see is very, very high. We have 6 students right now Our goal was 4, but we've had the interest, so we've brought students along. They're working with 3 to 4 faculty. It's been 1 term. We've met with the students, we being myself as the director and the associate director, and so we have a co-production aspect to the program where it's tailored. The program is not that we're going to do X, Y, Z. It's that we're going to identify what it is that this cohort together or individually needs, and then we'll bring that to the program as needed.
The reason research is so important is because without research, we don't know what works, right? Research, though, is not an end in itself. We have to be able to use that research to inform policy and practice, public health practice, clinical practice. And so what's critical is being able to both produce high quality research, but also to be able to translate it to policymakers. And that's something that TDI has been uniquely good at.
Dartmouth students are extremely well prepared in terms of what they're going to do with this research going forward. You know, I think we really are truly educating the future leaders, you know, whether that's healthcare providers or business leaders or policymakers, judges. You know, these are the Dartmouth students that if we give them experiences where they can make a difference in terms of applying that academic knowledge to research questions, that is going to phenomenally change the future of health disparities research.
Our budget for undergraduate research is about 47% funded by current use gifts. That means that every year there is 47% of our budget for undergraduate research that is uncertain. And so it is one of our top priorities in arts and sciences to support undergraduate research so that we can be assured that we always have the budget to provide the opportunities that the students want.
That's one of the reasons why the Dartmouth Network is here, to bring people together, regardless of how often they've come back to Dartmouth, how often they connect with each other, but when they're galvanized to do something and to do it together, it brings a lot of people back in. And that's exactly what they did to get this work done.
We're at a starting point with this entire project, and that starting point is beginning with Project HEAL and the HEAL Lab. However, the future for this is much broader than that, and I think the future is where we can bring a One Dartmouth approach to this, including engagement in Tuck around economic issues, engagement with the Thayer Engineering School around engineering solutions to this, and in the graduate programs in Guarini, I think we can bring an institution-wide approach to this in the future, and I think we're just at the start of building this approach that Dartmouth can take to solve this problem, and it all grows from the inspiration from the class of '74.
Legacy. Class wants to create a legacy, and as I've said often in some of our meetings, legacy isn't just an individual thing. It can be a group thing.
I really believe it's in the DNA of this class to try and make a difference. We've been doing that since we showed up on this campus, given the times that we grew up and the times that we were there. And I think that passion and that compassion is fueled by our love for the college and each other.
And amazingly, we already have 6 undergraduates working on addressing the health equity issue. We still need to expand and grow the research, and we need your help to reach the last 30% of our $500,000 target.
And we're 70% towards our goal of $500,000. So we're trying to get there. If we get to that goal, that $500,000 will support this program through 2030.
What kind of legacy did the class of '74, knowing what we know and having lived through the times that we've lived through, how could we ignore this? How could we not address this?
thank you again. I want to take a second. Kristen Beck, are you here? Perfect. So Kristen is here with your mom? Perfect, yeah. Kristen was the filmmaker of that film sponsored by Dr. Walton. Yeah, and whether it's a good or bad career choice, Kristen has decided to become a doctor, so we'll see. Good luck in starting medical school this fall. Or actually, it starts this summer, right? Yeah, okay, cool. And now I'd like to welcome Ines Kahl, Professor Kahl, to come up, and she's going to address us directly, and then we'll go to the panel.
I think I'm okay.
You're good.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Matt, for the introduction. And I'm really delighted to be here. And it's so wonderful to see so many of you. It must be really exciting to come to your 50th reunion. And of course, we're partially here for the people who did not make it to their 50th reunion. But allow me to introduce myself, and I feel like it doesn't require too much of an introduction. Matt did a spectacular job, but I'm an associate professor at TDI in health policy and clinical practice. I'm also a faculty in biomedical data science and in computer science, and as Matt mentioned, my background's in biomedical and systems engineering. But how that happened is a different story. Today, I'm speaking to you as the director, and as the director, it was my job to listen to what the class was interested in doing and what the program was interested in doing. And I actually was not involved in the early conversations. I actually was in Australia for 6 months. My spouse had a Fulbright there, and our whole family went there. And when I came back, Amber Barnato, the director of TDI, tapped me and said, "Hey, Ines, I think this program would really benefit from you leading it." And I said, "Okay, sure. It involves undergraduates, and it has a topic that I'm working on and very interested in." And I said, "Sounds great." So I started meeting with the team and listened. Whenever I'm developing anything, a lot of times people bring their background and their expertise. As an engineer, I try to listen for the problem that people are actually interested in and not just what I would want to bring. And so I listened, and I heard two things coming out of the conversations, two core things. One was health equity, and two was undergraduates. And when I heard that, I said, "That's fantastic." And people listened to me and said, "Oh, why is that fantastic?" And I said, health equity, and as we hear just briefly from the stories, and some of you might be in the field, in health, in other areas that address health equity, the space needs us to think differently. There's a requirement for change. If you heard what people said in the video, the word change came up so many times. And so when you think about change, in my mind, if you're going to create change, you can't create change before you have change agents. So who's going to do the change? And I said, this is amazing, because the people who should be doing and thinking about the change, we should be thinking as at the beginning of this journey that people take in deciding what they want to do, how they want to live their life, how they want to be in the world, and what they want to do in the world, starts typically for most at the undergraduate level. And so in my mind, intersecting this idea of change and what's required for change is really a change mindset. And it's the mindset of the person that says, I want to change something, and that's how everything happens, including this program. This wouldn't have happened without people. First, it was a decision in someone's mind. And so as an educator who sits on the track with students as they go from freshman year to senior year, I see myself as someone who's on a journey with students as they evolve in their mental model of who they are, of who the world is, and how they fit in it. And so I thought it was spectacular that we're thinking about this change agents and health equity for undergrads. And so it's a time when they're trying to think about what they want to do. Your mental model of what the real world is really, I don't want to say delusional, but something close to that. And it's, it has everything to do with what your parents told you the world is about and what you should do and how you should be and all of those types of things. But then for a lot of people, they don't experience the real world until they actually leave their schooling and they're faced with the real world. But those are not people who are prepared. And I'd like to think that in my quest as a professor, it's about helping students recognize what the real world is about, recognize the importance of their intentions, their mindset, where they're going to put their energy. And they are, as has been mentioned many times, they are going to be the change that's going to change things around us. And so for me, now going into thinking about the program and what we're going to develop, it was really about, of course, recognizing health equity in the science and the research, but also how do we put undergrads to view this research and what they get out of it. And what they get out of it is actually an incredible amount of elements. So from a mindset perspective, they start to recognize this interdisciplinary aspect. Everyone in the real world knows that although we're trained at the undergraduate level or graduate or any level really that has training with formal degreed program, it makes it seem like the field that you have studied is what you need to solve the world. And once you leave, you recognize that actually, no, we kind of need to work together. Just people who just do engineering or just do marketing or just do anything, one thing, don't typically produce something meaningful in the real world. So this idea of interdisciplinariness, this idea of being able to speak to people who are disciplinarily different than you is really, really important. And students start to see that in the program. They see it in working with faculty, working with students, hearing about other students and what they're working on and how different it is and how similar it is. And then that interacts with them to say, I never want to set foot in a lab again. Or, I am going to have a career where I can do my work from anywhere on a computer. Or any of these types of things. But it's just as important to recognize what you want to do. But typically, we don't start off in our first experience recognizing what we want to do. And it's just as important to find the things that you know you never want to do again. And so for students, this interaction, if you look at health equity, I'll go back one step and say, from my research, complexity science, complexity, we talk about systemic racism. If we just take the first word, the most key part of systemic racism is the systemic part. And the systemic, actually by definition, means that it has many, many pieces. And the emergent behavior of what happens, you don't see in any of the pieces, but you see at the overall level. And this is why people say, oh, well, how can you have systemic racism and systemic issues in care delivery for patients? Every single patient I see, I'm treating as best as I can. But it's not about that one interaction. It's about dynamically what happens during and throughout all of those pieces, both with the healthcare delivery system as well as with the person's personal life. And essentially, a person's decision to interact with the healthcare delivery system has so much to do with what are the decisions they have to handle. Can I go to work or not? Can someone take care of my child if I go to an appointment? How long is it going to take? Can I afford it? Will I lose my job? All of those different pieces. And so health equity, there is no health equity field. There is no health equity department because it's a problem. It's not an area where we have a discipline that will solve this problem. It's not a disciplinary problem that can be solved. It's a systemic problem that we need to think about as to how all the pieces interact with each other and lead to the problems that we see. So I personally feel an attachment to helping students recognize this interdisciplinary weaving and movement and the idea of dynamics. the idea of things happen over time and how one thing happening leads to another thing, which causes a situation to change, and now you make a different decision. So those are the really, really critical pieces that we were thinking about. So to talk a little bit about the program itself, so we are just wrapping up our first year, as I mentioned in the video. We had 6 students, and we were anticipating 4. We have the call open right now for students, and we're going to accept our cohort in August. One of the things I wanted to mention is that we talked about a strong piece, which is the research component. And I want to say something about the research component, because a lot of people might, just listening to the words that were said in the video, there's part of the research that's identifying the problem. There's parts of the research that's testing a solution, or coming up with a solution is even a research area in itself. Then there's testing the solution. Then there's testing the solution in the real world. So there's so many different pieces, and research actually crosses all of them. And the research that we have here at TDI, and more broadly as well within Dartmouth, really can look at and span the gamut of that trajectory of being able to get something from what's the problem to here's a solution. And of course, as many of you, if some of you might know, healthcare is uniquely positioned to, has been difficult for the field to be able to actually implement things that we know work. And on average, it takes about 17 years after something has been proven that it works to actually enter the healthcare delivery system. So that in itself is a really, really interesting problem. And it's because it's a systemic problem that it's not something like, oh, I don't need to go to the teller and get my money from a person. I can just have a device that just spits out my money. And it's everywhere. And it didn't take that long. And it's everywhere in the sense that it's in everywhere across the world. So these kinds of problems that are technical and engineering and how we're able to solve those problems relative to problems we see in healthcare that involve humans that you cannot guarantee what decision they're going to make and under what circumstances, just makes it that much more of a difficult problem. But nonetheless, we're of course, as many have said, well positioned to handle and to address and to challenge that problem. We have 3 students here from the program. I'll either introduce them now or we can introduce them once we bring everyone down. But 3 of the 6 are here with us today, and you'll be hearing from them. One last thing I wanted to say about overall how I think about developing the program is that a lot of people ask me, well, what are we doing in the program? And I said, oh, you mean operationally, what are we doing? As I said, X, Y, or Z. And I said, that's not identifying the problem and then developing a program that solves it. We're going to create a platform where students come and talk about, and I listen and hear what they need, what they're trying to do, what their goals are. And this year, we've sent students to conferences that otherwise wouldn't have gone. We've had students present posters and work that they've done. We've had students put on an amazing webinar, which many of you may have attended, on health equity in public health. And so that in itself, in my mind, is part of what starts you on a change agent mind. To feel that I don't just go to a college where here's my requirements, I check the boxes, and I'm good. No, we want students that look and say, oh, there's boxes. Do I like the boxes? The boxes don't work for me. I want a different box. That's what we want. And that's what's going to create change agents that actually will go out and not recognize when there's a problem in front of you. Sometimes we don't even recognize that there's a problem in front of us. It's just, we're so used to, it's the environment, it's how we've always done things. So that first mindset piece is really, really key. And if that is ingrained and people can see it, people can see their own mindset, it becomes really, really valuable in everything they do. I had someone ask me, once about mindset, and I told them, a mindset is essentially like a space in your brain. It's like, how do you see things around you? And I said, I try to think of my mindset as 75% grayed in and 25% white. So I'm priming myself to know that there's a whole bunch of stuff I don't know. And only with that mindset, when something comes up to you and you're like, oh, you start to recognize what it is that you don't know. And one of the hardest things to figure out is what it is that you don't know, because you don't know what it is that you don't know. And it's usually the assumption that, oh, I know exactly what the problem is. Oh, I know exactly how to solve this problem. Oh, I know this or this or this. But it's in creating space of what is it that you don't know, being inquisitive, going out and building out a webinar. Oh, what's a Zoom webinar versus a regular Zoom? Man, that's different. So they get to experience a lot of things, they get to question, and they become, in my mind, what I have seen of students so far, is that they really truly embody this, and we really do prepare them to handle the problems of today, be it health equity or be it any of the other big difficult problems that we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Inez. And you probably stay, yeah, perfect. So we'll go to the panel. I just want to say one thing. Now that you've been able to hear Professor Kyle, you can understand why we're so lucky. And also, she's funny. I mean, not funny, but she has a sense of, no, you have a great sense of humor. And I think one of the things that I remember most about Dartmouth was that class was fun. You know, you had to find the right class to go to, but it wasn't. I told somebody earlier today about the time I woke up, and I forget which roommate told me, hey, it's this time, and I said, oh my gosh, my exam started like a half an hour ago, and I somehow made it to that exam and somehow passed it, so that wasn't fun. But in general, so many things at Dartmouth were, and the professors made it fun. They had a sense of humor, they had a sense of a big picture, and that's why I'm very excited that we've begun this investment in this program, and specifically with you leading the program, because I believe in Inez, and I believe the program will succeed, not because of her only, but partly because of her only. And so she's exactly the right person to start our program. Thank you. And now, Cheryl Bascom and Inez and our other panelists will join us up front. And Mike, do you have how will we do this?
Why don't I sit here and
Cheryl's hands. Perfect.
Sit as you see fit. But I'm going to go off script a minute. Surprise. Again, I'm Cheryl Bascom, class of '82, and Vice President for Alumni Relations. And as a result of that, I'm here for all the reunions. And I was here the last time your class had a reunion. And a few people came up to me and said, we're seeing this horrible data that shows exactly what you've seen today. And we need to have some more data. We need to gather more information. This is terrible. And I said, you don't need to gather any more information. What are you going to do with it? What are you going to take this information and do? And I had no idea when I said that A, they would take me seriously, but B, what they would do with that information. And you're sitting here looking at what they did with this information. And, oops, and it just brings a lump to my throat and a tear to my eye, because this is impactful and it's permanent and it has leverage. And you're seeing that here. So I want to thank the group, the working group, who came up with this. Thank you. And now we'll start. So we have our experts here. We have our researchers. We have our folks who are making a difference. And you heard what a wonderful start the program is off to this year. And I'd love to have you share some of the learnings that are actually going to inform the program going forward that you've learned in the first year. And why don't we just go straight down and introduce yourselves as you answer the program. Ines?
Should I start?
Yep.
Okay. I'm good. I'm mic'd. Thank you for that question. From the programmatic perspective, I think there are minor tweaks, operational tweaks, in terms of, do we put something on a website? Do we send something this way or that way? I think we've developed more of a platform of a place and a way of working, a process by which the program works. And we bring students together to come up with ideas. And so there'll always be a personal touch each time. And what ends up happening, the outcome of what you see, is going to be different each year, but it will be geared to actually tailored to solve exactly the needs of the students for that cohort. So for now, we see ourselves on a steady state of accepting 6 students per year, if we get that many next year as well. And then just allowing, from a co-production perspective, for people who are not aware, it's a term that TDI coined in terms of, or used widely, and at times is attributed to them, where you're co-producing what it is that you'd like to do. And so it's in the process of co-producing rather than in the result of what you actually created. The focus is in that co-production piece.
Great. Go ahead and introduce yourself and then take a shot.
It does not, oh, okay.
Hello? Oh, sorry. Anyways, my name is Justin Herrera. I am a 24, and I was a health equity fellow under Dr. Alkadev along with Uma. And one of the best parts of the program that I hope continues to inform future cohorts is definitely community. I feel like just having our monthly check-ins, learning what my other fellows are doing in research was so interesting and really helped inform my own work, what I want to do in the future, and also like other ideas for like co-production. Like when Carolyn brought the idea of the webinar, I thought that was so cool and so interesting, and that wouldn't have happened if we all just didn't have the opportunity to talk and bounce ideas off each other. And yeah, I hope future cohorts also develop that sense of community with each other and find other ways to connect throughout the very busy terms of Dartmouth. So yeah, also is a great way to always also like just de-stress from like finals and stuff, just talking to each other and finding that community.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Carolyn. I'm a 25, so I'm a junior. I was a member of the Health Equity Scholars Program this past year. I was in Dr. Kael's lab, the Sustainable Health Lab. And I would echo what Justin said. I think that being able to have peers to learn from is something that's very unique to this program. I came into this program as a previous presidential research scholar at Dartmouth and also just an undergraduate research scholar. And in both of those prior programs, it was a very individualistic timeline. It was like you get funding to do your research in your lab, and that's what you do for the year. But in this program specifically, when you have like these check-ins and these resources and opportunities to attend conferences or create webinars, it's a way to really gain like grounding and significant exposure in the realm of health equity. And within these experiences, I think we've all gotten the opportunity to see the types of career pathways that you can pursue that involve health equity that maybe we didn't know about beforehand.
Hi, I'm Priyanshu Alluri. I'm 26, and I did the Health Equity Scholars last year with Professor Marrero. He's at the engineering department. So my background is mainly computation, and most of my research is in the STEM fields, looking at computation and machine learning algorithms. And I think the importance of this cohort for me was looking at health equity, not just from like the view of numbers and math, but also like from the very real, visceral human impact, right? So because the cohort was from all disciplines, I got access to not just this computation, but also this other view of looking at it from the humanistic perspective. I think that's like a really important way that I can go forward and modify my research as I walk from there.
Like I said, if you were all orthopedists, it would be great. I'm just going to tell you something. I have a friend, he did not go to Dartmouth, but he was a physicist, and we met because in the summers we would work in Appalachia on Appalachia Service Project. It's a little too long a story to tell in the whole, but that's a place where you go and help people rebuild houses, and you're leading teams of kids. They have to be at least 9th grade to be on your team, and they have to do some building things during the winter so they learn not to hit their thumb with a nail or vice versa or something. Anyway, you go on these things and you get to know these people really well. So after 7 years, I knew this guy pretty well, and he'd risen up through the ranks to become, starting as a physicist working in a glue lab, then he was the director of brand management. He decided he really liked the science of brands and how basically businesses run and protect their brands. So he was the director for the whole of 3M for brand management, which is a big job. But he always kind of thought and still thinks of things like a physicist. He tells these little funny stories, and so one time he's telling me he loves the Twins, which is a baseball team you might have heard of in Minnesota. And he goes, I've realized that people have a funny way of talking about the Twins. And he said, because it relates to essentially how they see the world or how they see the Twins, and it's how they actually choose to buy things. I said, well, that sounds crazy. So he explains that basically he asked someone, okay, they went to the game, and so what happened? Oh, they lost. And he said, when they tell you that, they realize they're not truly a fan. When you're a real fan, we lost. You remember the team whether they win or they lose. And I carried that with me beginning about, 1995 or whatever, and I realized with this project that we lost classmates. So right from the beginning, because Dean changed my mind about a bunch of things, I realized it was certainly a loss of a few people I knew, and I'll be straightforward. All of the friends that I lost up to this point had been white, close friends. But once it was clear to me that actually that math didn't support that as a conclusion that that was the problem, it was a relatively easy change for me to understand, no, this is the experience that the class, that we had. Now, I also, and some of you know this, I would say I've had 3 careers, one as a orthopedic teacher and then one as an Army person, which that definitely is a long career by itself. And then I got lucky and I joined J&J. When you're in a practice, even at the University of Minnesota, you don't do big numbers research, the kind of things you're speaking about. But at J&J, we do big numbers research all the time. So I started getting in these projects where I said, well, how many total shoulders have we done? Those numbers, when you're talking about a big company, that's thousands, not like 100, which you might have in your practice. So I said, let's take this apart and see, because we have this big sample, and shoulders don't just like white guys or black guys or anybody else for that matter. And it actually is preferentially to get your shoulder arthritic if you're a woman. That's not surprisingly related to osteoporosis. But in reality, I said, well, how many of these shoulder replacements, because they're kind of popular, if you have a bad shoulder, you might like it replaced, it hurts all the time. How many of them were done in black people? And we do the math, and it's throughout the whole United States, and you kind of know what the proportion of people is. And it turned out that the ability to access shoulder care might be good or not good, but if you're a black person, you're less than half as likely, even though you'd be just as likely to have shoulder arthritis, you're less than half as likely to get this shoulder improving treatment. And we started looking at it at other things now. They were getting serious about looking at it throughout, kind of like the Dartmouth Institute and the small area maps that they produce. They're trying to redo some of these maps without trying to understand whether or not black people are equally essentially able to access care as white people. And in our own experience inside of the company, it turns out not. So I won't say that we're going to solve it at Dartmouth, but I do believe Dr. Wright was right. The 2 Wrights. Dr. Wright was correct that while we may not solve this problem, we have to be involved in it. And that always rung true for me from the moment he said it to to Rocky. And in a way said it to all of us because you just heard him in the film talking about it. That's my contribution here.
Thank you, Matt. Terrific. Ines, what are some of the specific changes to the healthcare systems or the provider practices, some of which Matt has highlighted, that could come from the research you all are doing?
So we have people who are working in maternal health. We have people who are working in cancer. My area is in end-of-life care. We have people working in breast cancer care. And so there's opportunities for people with within those disease populations. Now, as I mentioned, which hospitals adopt best practices or different practices is something that's completely unregulated. And it just has to do with the hospital or the practice, their knowledge, their interests, so while I could mention a few of those things, I think that I'll shift the question a little bit, if I may, and talk again about the importance and the difficulty of taking a problem, preparing its solution, and implementing its solution. And we recently had a Dartmouth Institute residency week, and as a group, which we have been working on this small area problem and this problem of variations, geographic variations, and we said, people have been working on this problem for 40 years. Why is it that it's still not implemented? Why have we not seen implemented changes? Why do we still see these things? And so I raised my hand and I said, well, for many of us, if you see a product, you go from here's a problem that we're trying to solve, to I create the product, to here's FDA approval, to here's the mechanisms for it to be distributed in the real world. There's a clear path from beginning to end. In healthcare policy, in healthcare change, we don't have anything like that. There isn't anything like that. And if anything, healthcare delivery and its research enterprise is actually fragmented in that we have, basic research, we have clinical, then we have implementation science, then we hope and pray. But there isn't and so this is part of some of the work that I bring in terms of my research, there isn't this concept of how do I implement and the factors that are important in implementation at the phase where I'm identifying the problem and coming up with a solution. And so thinking about what is it going to take for us to think about the problem more integrated and create solutions there is actually a problem we have to address before we can start to expect solutions coming to the clinic and coming to every clinic near you. So there's still some things that need to be worked out. And it's important for us to realize that it is quite a fragmented process at the moment, and it's quite complex. It's really quite complex, and no one person is just a diabetic or just has dementia or we all have the interconnections of either multiple conditions or conditions that go and come, and the dynamics of the real world need to be incorporated in the way that we do our science as well.
That is helpful, both helpful and a little depressing in terms of the dynamics of the real world. But yes, I think that helps us parse it out a little bit better. I'm curious from the young researchers, why did you select this to work on? What was your motivation? And why don't we start with Dan on that end?
Nice. I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier about looking at this from a humanistic perspective. It's easy to understand or just think about the fact that when we're doing CS, when we're doing computation, that these negative numbers, that these higher loss functions, these higher costs represent a much bigger picture, but it's hard to see that, right? It's hard to actually feel the weight of years of systemic biases. For me, on my graph, it just looks like a slightly lower number. And I think part of why I went into and tried so hard to get into this Health Equity Scholars Program was because I wanted to be able to experience and understand, or not experience, but understand what these numbers meant, right? Because computation and what I'm doing here is so much of my career or my life at Dartmouth, I I feel like I should be able to understand what they mean on more of a visceral level, on the humanistic level, like I was saying earlier.
Great, thank you. Carolyn?
I think that, so I'm a biology and global health studies major here at Dartmouth, so a lot of my work when I first came to Dartmouth was in pure science, so it was a lot of like wet lab, like pipetting, CRISPR-Cas9 type work. And after I'd done it for about a year, I felt that it was interesting, but it wasn't what I was the most passionate about. And when I found Dr. Kael's lab, I was really, really excited to be able to have the opportunity to be a part of it. I believed, and I know that I found a topic that I really, really am passionate about pursuing. From my own personal perspective, I grew up in North Seattle with my mom, and in North Seattle, the community that I come from is fairly low income and very diverse in every way, and I think that my friends and I, my community and I all experienced very similar experiences of health inequities in terms of who was passing on from COVID or from illness in Seattle. And so when I came to Dartmouth, it was always this really deep desire within me to want to work towards bridging this gap of healthcare disparities. It was something that I really, really, really wanted to do. And so having the opportunity to do it through this program has been like a huge honor. It's been one of the greatest opportunities I've had the chance to experience in my time at Dartmouth.
So one of my main motivations for getting into health equity, and specifically in the maternal health field, honestly has to do with my mom. Growing up, she spoke a lot about her birthing experience and how she experienced preeclampsia and how she just felt so disempowered as a patient in her provider interactions. And one of the main reasons I want to get into health equity was to explore ways that we can empower birthing people within hospital spaces. In the United States right now, there is a very disproportionate Black maternal mortality rate, and I hope to continue doing work to figure out ways to mitigate those disparities. And
Great.
Terrific.
Thank you. Can I add something?
Absolutely.
I think from what you guys have heard, typically when students come to work, either in my lab generally or within the program, I'm always listening to what's their story. And when they come and they talk about what they want to do and what they're looking to experience, I'm generally trying to, hopefully not prod, but give them the opportunity to get to the point where they feel like we can have the conversation about why you're doing what you're doing. In terms of the experiential piece, people talk about what they did. I pipetted, I worked on something specific, I learned a specific skill. But the what typically comes from the why. And for a lot of students, they come and they feel like, well, my why is like here, it's in my heart. I know what my why is, but who wants to know my why? It's like for me, it's not for everybody else. But actually, it's very, very empowering to share your why. And when I work with people, even colleagues, I work differently with them when I know why it is they're doing what they're doing. I recognize and I give more compassion and space when I recognize that, oh, someone's doing this for this reason. Or what it's done a lot is a lot of people with very different backgrounds come with the same why. But they have different skill sets. But they also come from different fields. And one of the things that's key about this program is that all our students come from very different programs across the college. I don't know if we have anyone from the same department. And they all interact. And if you know anything about academia, literally different fields speak different languages. So you're saying words that mean one thing in one field and mean something else in another field. Take the word coding in quantitative space or in qualitative space. It's the same phrase, you could say it, but it means something completely different. So becoming and working with people who work in different fields, it's very easy to feel like it's a really high bar to listen to people and work really, really hard to understand what is it that they're actually trying to say from their words. But when you have this shared why, it lowers that bar in terms of, oh, you have more enthusiasm around trying to understand better. And in that process, you become better at listening to people who speak differently. And here it may sound like speak differently, like accent or something, but literally we all speak differently, and we're all speaking from the mental models of how we were trained or how we experience things in our lives. And when we come to a point where people learn at a young age how to listen and how to speak to people, even when we're speaking about, you know, people in the same company talking from different departments, it makes you a better person. And I'm sure you guys might be familiar, you know, when Google did research on who are their most successful people, it used to be that Google put a, they wanted to get like the top X% of computer scientists from all the schools. And that was their method by which they hired people. Then they ran an analysis to see who are the most successful people. And it was people who had great listening skills, could work with other people, even in a field where the technical expertise is key. They recognize that the human level is what's needed to actually create anything more or beyond yourself.
Great. So that gets back to what you were telling us earlier about how important it is for these students to come together and learn collaboration, because it is an interdisciplinary program, more importantly, an interdisciplinary world, and you will be sharing your skills and your why as you move out of the program and into whatever careers. I know we are running out of time, and I do want to turn it over, but I want to have you all thank these fabulous people for being here today. And I will turn it back to Matt.
Well, I want to thank all the class members who were able to be here, and the panel in particular. And you can sit here just for a second. I would say I'd be skipping a step if I didn't recognize that Freddie Fu, who was a good friend of mine and a classmate of yours, passed on as well. Freddie and I were friends for a lot of reasons. Any of you who played ping pong with Freddie would have probably lost. I did. But he was a classmate here in the college, and then he was skipped ahead of us running already in the medical school, but I was chasing him there, and suddenly I ended up in Pittsburgh, and there we were again together. And he was my senior resident for a variety of different circumstances. I could never keep up with Freddie, but we became friends and did some research together later in life. And I was actually honored by Freddie because I was the last, while he was alive, visiting professor that he invited to the University of Pittsburgh, and it was actually the first visiting professor they'd had after COVID. It closed it down for a long time, so I was lucky to go kind of in two roles. But Freddie was interesting that particular day that I went, because sometimes you don't know why you're a friend of someone for a long time. And any of you don't know Freddie, he was one of the more famous orthopedists in the world at the time he died. And I'm not talking the United States or Pittsburgh, I mean the world. And he'd made so many important contributions in sports medicine that being friends with me was like the last thing he should ever be. I'm not in that class. But it was funny because he said, you know why we became good friends? And I said, well, you know, we did these things together, you know, and wrote together. He said, no, because you defended me. And Fu, you can figure out right away, not from here probably. And Freddie spoke English, but if you had to listen because he spoke so fast. But the fact is, people discriminated against Freddie. And he said, no, at Pittsburgh early on when somebody told me I should go home, you said, why would he do that? And ever after that, we were close friends. But I'd never known until that last day that I was with him. He died a few months later. And he was always sending out pictures of flowers, so we're always in touch with Freddie. But it was interesting to me, and I have no particular gift for being open-minded, by the way, but or insightful. But it was just a reaction, and Freddie took it. And then what I realized about Freddie beyond that is that he was inclusive like that all his life. So when Freddie passed on, what was so remarkable is the number of people who had talked about what he had done for them. And this was not simply famous white guy sports surgeons who'd taken care of some famous athlete. This was almost disproportionately women and people of color. Freddie lifted up everybody around him all his life. And so the thing that excites me so much about this program, not going to cry, is that it is our opportunity to do the same thing Freddie would have had us do, to lift up others. So thank you all, Cheryl, Enos, our scholars. I'm very excited about the computational part in machine learning. You can replace me. See you all in a little bit.
Thank you guys. I really appreciate it. That was terrific.